Hello friends, today we're going to talk about not the Nazca lines, but the people who once upon a time broke their back to the desert sun in order to create this landscape of ruins and geoglyphs. Developed between the year 200 before Christ and the year 600 of our era, the Nazca culture is based in the Peruvian region of Ica. Its capital, Cahuachi, lies next to the Aja River, and from there it irradiated its influence towards Pisco to the north and towards Arequipa to the south. They also spread towards the east, reaching the higher zones of Ayacucho. The German archaeologist Federico Max Hulle was the first one to describe the Nazca culture around the year 1900. With findings from Ocucaje district of the Ica department, Hulle identified the culture's origin and typologies, which he named Proto-Nazca, placing it prior to the Tiwanaku, today known as the Tiwanaku Wari. It was also heavily influenced by the previous Topara culture, developed in this territory. Both had similar traditions and used the same agricultural techniques. They were also both heavily military cultures. The Nazca Society was developed in one of the Peruvian landscape's most difficult zones and territories, with an arid subtropical climate with deserts that surround the department's little valleys such as Rio Grande, Ica, or Pisco. These rivers dry up in summer and increase their flow in winter. This event determines the geographical landscape in which once upon a time the Nazca lived. From there, they expanded to the Chinches Valley to the north and down to the Valley of Acari, Arequipa, to the south. Archaeology has divided the history of the Nazca in four main stages. First, there's the Early Nazca, during which the first Nazca community sprouted based on the Rio Grande basin. Then we have the Middle Nazca, during which their own culture is given shape under the influence of Paracas culture. The Cahuachi Ceremonial Center was built around this era. Then we go to the Late Nazca. Cahuachi is abandoned and the people spread all over the territory. During this period, different religious temples were built. The most well-known one is the Estaqueria Center. And finally, the Final Nazca, which begins around the year 600 of our era and represents the ending of the Nazca culture. It is believed that a series of climatological setbacks could have affected agriculture. Others believe that other warlike people could have just wiped them out. In regards of their political and social organization, it is believed that the Nazca Society was divided in social classes, being a military theocratic state, in which power was held by priests and warlords. This elite had the capacity to organize the community work and of managing ceremonial activities. They would live in pyramid-like buildings. Their bedrooms were made out of sun-dried brick and their walls covered by a layer of lime or plaster to cover different cracks. One step below and at their service would be the artisans, crafters, architects, astrologers, musicians, and soldiers. These people lived in small cities or in ceremonial centers, among which we can highlight the one in Cahuachi. At the bottom of this society, we could find farmers and fishermen. The former dwelled in fertile valleys, in huts covered with straw right next to the farmlands. They grew up in villages around an adobe pyramid that would act as a religious center. The Nazca Society didn't have a unified government, but was rather an aggregation of dominions. These dominions would have their own ruler and authority, generally a priest, and were found in valleys. Settlements could be found at each end of the valley, and the rest of the territory along the river was dedicated to agriculture alone. It is admitted that the Nazca expansion was military-based and violent, a thought that comes from the presence of fortified cities around Nazca. The considerable amount of weapons found in tombs and the custom trophy heads that would garnish the majority of their artistic expressions suggests that they lived in a warlike world. Regarding their economy, it was heavily based on agriculture. Their main products consisted of pumpkin, beans, corn, zapallo, yuca, guaya, peanuts, ají, or cotton. Sea fishing and seafood gathering were of utmost importance too, especially for the coast inhabitants, who would trade their sea products in order to complete their diet with other things from the inland. Hunting was another activity that likely complemented the Nazca economy, although it was most probably of less importance than farming and seafaring. Commerce did, however, play a pivotal role in the economy, as it was indispensable to satisfy the needs of the population, who often had to face long periods of drought. They kept a steady trading activity with the Huarpa culture, trading Huarpa products such as potatoes and wool in exchange for fish, cotton, and Nazca ceramics. They were also well known for their knowledge and their management of hydric resources, particularly subterranean ones, which they used for irrigation thanks to their clever projects. Underground galleries built to make the most out of the phreatic zone in the parts in which the river flow right beneath the surface are known as pourpose. Their hydraulic inventions through aqueducts, canals, and wells facilitated water supply. Proof of this is the construction of the canals in Cantayoc and Los Puquillos. And there are plenty of things Salvar Nazca has to say about these, as they did not only use the Puquillos and a few other canals, but this represented a very small fraction of an enormous genius system of irrigation. But as we have already said, we are not addressing the Nazca lines today. We will deal with that in a future video, as we often say. In those, we will present you with the biggest explanation the world has ever heard about this great enigma. The Nazca dedicated their rituals to the gods of the sea, sky, land, fire, water, and wind. Their constructions were meant for the gods, hoping that there would be no droughts. The religion also had a certain link with the mystery of the Nazca lines, considered by many as places of prayer and devotion. However, our project has learned that if these lines had anything to do with their religious prayers, it was because their lives depended on these lines. What we believe is that if there were rituals carried out there, the prayers would be meant to beg for their families to have steady food. As for burials and funerals, they were generally individualized and in shallow pits. The place in the hierarchy of the deceased determined the complexity of their chamber and the amount of items that could be found in the tomb. The mummy would be placed in a fetal position and enveloped in cloth, forming some kind of bale. Certain bales have what we call a fake head, a small lump in the upper part simulating a head. The tombs meant for villagers were anything but luxurious, as this was safe for nobility only. We have to address that the way that these mummies were placed was very similar to the way that the Paracas buried their deceased. Head mummification was a widespread custom for the Nazca. Heads would possibly belong to defeated warriors. Nowadays, we consider such customs as barbaric, but back in the day, it was actually pretty well accepted. It was thought that a warrior's prestige and worth was determined by the amount of heads that they possessed. That granted him authority and power. These rights have their origin in the Chavin culture and in the Paracas culture. In order to make a head trophy, they would remove the brain from the bottom, suit the mouth, and pierce a little hole in the forehead, through which they would slip a rope in order to hang them. The true reason behind the trophy heads is blurry. The most well accepted is that the winning warrior had the right to chop the defeated fighter's head off and turn it into a trophy that he would always carry with him. But the findings of heads belonging to children and women who were not associated with war at all have sprouted different theories. Perhaps there was a cult, or these rituals were supposed to be part of a cult to fertility. But let us move onward. Considered as the descendants or the continuators of the Paracas civilization, the Nazca stood out due to their creativity in pictoric, ceramic, and textile arts. Nazca ceramics reproduced animals, plants, men and women carrying out daily activities. These figures are generally decorated with mineral paint, carefully smashed and blended with natural materials such as water or tree sap. Figures of mutilated men were also numerous, suggesting a link with human sacrifice. The ceramic of the Nazca is considered as one of the best and most complete in ancient Peru. The high quality and the variety make it rivalize with the Moche ceramic, which is also highly regarded. It is said that the Nazca were horrified of emptiness, of void, as most of their ceramics hardly ever have any unpainted traces or pots in them. The most typical shape for vases is known as the globular jug, with two pouring tips and a handle. They also crafted spheric cooking pots, mugs, and glasses. The decoration for their ceramics stands out for its polychromia and the complexity, as they used up to 11 gradations in one single piece. They also knew up to 190 different color hues. Nazca architects used wood, adobe, and tree bark in order to build their buildings and ceremonial centers. Mixing dirt and water, they elaborated adobe to build the sanctuaries for the nobility, shaped as a truncated pyramid. Examples of this are the pyramids of Tinguilla and Cahuachi. These two are excellent shows of urban planification. The first one is possibly the best example of their architectonic expression, while the later one is considered as the capital of the Nazca Empire. They manipulated gold and silver to craft masks, earmuffs, nose rings, and other ritualistic items decorated through the method of repoussage. And what is this, you might be wondering? Well, it is a method of working metal in which you want to achieve a figure in relief, similar to the coins that we have nowadays. Interesting, don't you think? To craft their fabrics, they used cotton and wool from camelids, being masters of the techniques of brocade, upholstery, gauzes, painted cloth, three-dimensional fabric, and embroiderments. Over the plain fabric of cotton, they would use the wool from camelids inked in a different color. The Nazca were heirs to the Topara culture in terms of how beautiful, complex, and refined their clothing items and fabrics were. But it is believed that they never quite achieved the excellence of the Topara in this regard. And what about music? Did they have any instruments? Yes, we have found different instruments in the Nazcan tombs. They were generally built in ceramic and they include trumpets, drums, and quenas. All of these were artistically decorated, oftentimes with anthropomorphic themes, such as humans or even animal heads decorating them. The findings of ceramic flutes surpasses by quite some margin the findings of any other musically related items from other pre-Columbine cultures. These flutes have up to 11 different notes that belong to musical scales that have actually been used in contemporary times by musicians to compose themes such as the Pampas de Nazca Symphony and the Dance of the Nazca, among others. And I hope you have enjoyed this episode and you find yourself a little bit closer to these people, as besides them being the creators of the enigmatic Lines of Nazca, they were also people with very, very complex lives worthy of being told about. And now, as always, smash the like button if you've liked the video, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't and if you please, and also don't forget to hit the bell so you're aware of any future videos, each of which will draw you closer and closer to the answer of the biggest question of them all. What are the Nazca lines? I am Alberto Escudero, representing our head chair, Carlos Enrique Hermida, and this has been Salvar Nazca. Until the next time.
Solo en YouTube.